Administrator Valera of the Galactic Council smoothed her iridescent feathers as she reviewed the latest report. Her secondary eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress among the Aetherian species, while her primary set remained fixed on the holographic display. The readings couldn't be correct. No sapient species could have evolved on such a hostile world. "Explain this again," she commanded, her crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. "You're telling me these humans, developed on a planet with nearly twice the standard gravitational pull, toxic levels of oxygen, and temperature variations that would shatter most crystalline life forms." Senior xenobiologist Zixtal bobbed his gelatinous form in agreement. "Not only that, Administrator, but they've achieved spaceflight using chemical propulsion. Primitive, yes, but remarkable given their environment." His membrane rippled with barely contained excitement. "They're broadcasting their presence across the galaxy using electromagnetic waves." Valera's feathers shifted to a deep blue of contemplation. The council chamber, with its soaring crystalline spires and floating platforms designed to accommodate the 100-plus species of the Galactic Federation, suddenly felt uncomfortably small. These humans, these Deathworlders, presented an interesting dilemma. "Have they detected our observation platforms?" she asked. "No, Administrator. They're still arguing about whether certain lights in their sky are natural phenomena or artificial satellites." Zixtal's form rippled with what passed for amusement among his kind. "They're quite entertaining to watch." The Administrator rose from her perch, her anti-gravity assists humming softly as she glided to the chamber's central projection space. With a gesture, she brought up the humans' home planet. Earth, they called it. Such an unimaginative name for such a deadly world. "The Council will need to be informed," she declared. "These humans, they'll need protection, guidance. Look how they waste their resources on internal conflicts, how they damage their biosphere through inefficient industrial processes." She gestured at various hotspots on the floating globe. "They're like infant cricks trying to build a quantum computer." Security Director Malvex, who had been quietly observing from his suspension field, finally spoke. His chitinous exterior clicked softly as he adjusted his position. "Administrator, with respect, I suggest caution. Any species that survives on a Deathworld is obviously in desperate need of our help." Valera interrupted, her feathers rippling with certainty. "Look at their primitive shielding technology. Their ships would be torn apart by the smallest spatial distortion. We have a duty to protect them from the dangers of space travel until they're ready." Zixtal eagerly joined in, his form undulating with enthusiasm. "We could restrict their vessels to safe zones, establish protective guidelines for their own good. The Merchant Guild already has protocols for dealing with emerging species." Valera's feathers shifted to the gold of satisfaction. "Exactly. We'll present ourselves as benefactors, guides to help them navigate the complexities of galactic society." She paused, considering. "They seem to respond well to hierarchical structures. We'll create a regulatory framework that appears to welcome them while keeping them safely contained." Security Director Malvex's mandibles clicked in what might have been concern. "Administrator, perhaps we should review their military capabilities more thoroughly. Their entertainment broadcasts show a concerning preoccupation with fantasy and imagination." Valera dismissed. "Really, Malvex, you can't take their fictional narratives seriously. They're clearly using them as a coping mechanism for their harsh environment." She turned her primary eyes to the global projection again. "Besides, look at their weapons. Chemical projectiles and crude atomic devices. They couldn't possibly pose a threat to modern galactic civilizations." The chamber's automated systems began announcing the arrival of council members for the emergency session. Valera's feathers preened themselves into perfect diplomatic arrangement. "We'll present this as a humanitarian mission," she declared. "The Council loves feeling benevolent, and these humans will undoubtedly be grateful for our protection." As the chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy, Valera prepared to present her proposal. Her feathers glowed with confidence as she arranged the presentation materials, completely missing the way the human global projection highlighted military installations her sensors had dismissed as primitive manufacturing centers. In the background, Security Director Malvex quietly began updating his threat assessment protocols. Something about those human entertainment broadcasts kept nagging at his instincts, especially the ones they labeled historical documentaries about something called asymmetric warfare. But surely the administrator was right. What harm could come from taking a protective role over such a primitive species? After all, they were just Deathworlders who needed guidance, weren't they? The council session was about to begin, and with it, the galaxy's first official step toward discovering exactly how wrong certain assumptions could be. 5 cycles had passed since first contact, and Administrator Valara was feeling particularly pleased with herself. The integration of humanity into the galactic community had gone precisely as planned. Perhaps too perfectly, a fact that continued to disturb Security Director Malvex. The Galactic Council's Grand Chamber hosted yet another trade regulation session. Human Ambassador Chen stood patiently at the petitioner's podium, her small frame dwarfed by the towering crystalline structure. Unlike most species who found the elevated platform intimidating, she seemed completely at ease despite the crushing artificial gravity meant to accommodate the high-gravity species. "We accept the Council's new safety restrictions on human vessels," Ambassador Chen announced, her voice clear and steady. "The designated corridors will be more than sufficient for our trading needs." Valera's feathers rippled with satisfaction. The Council is pleased by humanity's cooperation. These measures are, of course, for your own protection. The newly restricted zones contain dangerous gravitational anomalies that your current technology cannot possibly handle. In his observation pod, Malvex's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Ambassador," he chittered, "our records show human mining operations have already adapted remarkably well to previous restrictions. Your efficiency rates have actually increased despite limited operational zones." Chen's smile never wavered. "We're very good at working with what we have, Director. Necessity breeds innovation, as we say." The chamber's atmosphere shifted as Krickstall, the newly appointed representative of the Kraxan Corporation, glided forward on his gravity disk. His crystalline form refracted light in patterns that the Council recognized as aggressive ambition. "Speaking of innovation," Krickstall chimed, "our latest survey shows the human colony on Eden 9 has discovered significant graviton ore deposits. Given humanity's limited capability to safely extract such dangerous materials, Kraxan Corporation offers to handle the mining operations. For a modest fee, of course." Ambassador Chen's smile somehow grew warmer. "That's a generous offer, Representative. We'll need time to consider it properly. Our colonists are quite attached to their mining operations." Valera noticed something odd in that moment. The human's surface body temperature had remained perfectly steady throughout the exchange. Most species showed some thermal variation during negotiations, but Chen was like a carefully regulated machine. In the observation galleries, xenobiologist Zixtol was reviewing the latest data from human space. "Fascinating," he bubbled to himself. "Their colonial development rate under restriction is 43% higher than projected. They're thriving in conditions that should be hampering their growth." The junior analyst, fresh from studying human entertainment broadcasts, touched their neural tendrils together. "Have you seen their new popular entertainment series? They call it Historical Lessons, The Art of War. It's being broadcast free across all their colonies." "Entertainment doesn't concern us," Zixtol dismissed. "Focus on their industrial output reports." Meanwhile, Krickstall was pressing his advantage. "Surely the Council agrees that graviton ore extraction requires experienced handling. We wouldn't want any accidents in human space." "The Council's primary concern is safety," Valera agreed, her feathers shimmering with authority. "Ambassador Chen, perhaps you should consult with your government about accepting Kraxan's assistance." "Of course, Administrator. We always appreciate the Council's guidance." Chen bowed slightly. Though I should mention our colonists have developed some interesting extraction techniques. They're quite innovative when faced with challenges. Malvex's sensory appendages twitched. Something in the ambassador's tone triggered his threat assessment protocols. He accessed the latest security feeds from human space. Their ships were indeed following all restricted route mandates, but something about their flight patterns. In the shadows of the chamber, Trade Minister Laxna approached Valora privately. The humans have requested permission to establish a new colony in the Sector 7 dead zone. It's a toxic wasteland. No other species can survive there. Valora's feathers rippled with amusement. Let them have it. They're so eager to prove themselves useful, taking on worlds no one else wants. It keeps them occupied and away from more valuable territories. As the session concluded, Ambassador Chen made her way to the communication hub. Her measured stride never faltered under the crushing gravity. She transmitted a brief message to Earth. Phase 3 proceeding as planned. Kraxin Corporation proceeding exactly as predicted. Request permission to proceed with Phase 4. The response came within moments. Permission granted. Let them keep thinking they're protecting us. It's almost time to show them what Deathworlders can really do. In his security office, Malvex was finally piecing together the pattern in human ship movements. They weren't just following prescribed routes. They were mapping every possible approach vector to major galactic trade hubs. Their seemingly random colony placements created a perfect strategic network across supposedly worthless systems. But surely he was being paranoid. After all, humans were such an agreeable species, always smiling, always compliant, always watching, always learning, always preparing. The day Kraxin Corporation would attempt to seize Eden 9 was already marked on human military calendars. The galaxy was about to learn why smiling Deathworlders were the most dangerous kind of all. The emergency alarms in the Galactic Council chamber hadn't activated in over 300 cycles. Their sudden wailing sent waves of distress through the assembled representatives. Administrator Valora's feathers shifted to alarm red as the emergency transmission from Kraxin Corporation cut through all standard protocols. This is Overseer Crixtal. Eden 9 colony has. They've, by the eternal stars, they were waiting for us. The transmission crackled with weapons fire in the background. The humans, they're not. This isn't possible. The chamber's central hologram activated, showing the Eden 9 system. What had been a small mining colony now bristled with previously undetected defense platforms. The Kraxin peacekeeping fleet, in reality an invasion force, hung motionless in space, caught in overlapping gravitational fields that shouldn't have been possible with primitive human technology. Ambassador Chen walked calmly to the center of the chamber. Gone was the perpetual smile, replaced by an expression that made Security Director Malvex's threat assessors spike to unprecedented levels. The Kraxin Corporation, Chen stated flatly, launched an unauthorized military action against a human colony. Their fleet arrived exactly when and where we predicted they would, using exactly the tactics we anticipated. Her voice carried effortlessly through the shocked silence. We've been watching, learning, preparing. For 5 cycles, we've studied how you think, how you fight, how you underestimate us. Valora's feathers trembled. But your ships, your technology. Oh, those primitive vessels. Chen's smile returned, but it wasn't the servile expression they'd grown used to. Would you like to see our actual ships now? The hologram shifted. From the supposedly toxic dead zone colonies, ships emerged. Not the crude chemical-driven vessels the Council had dismissed, but sleek predators of space, their hulls gleaming with technology that borrowed from every species in the galaxy and improved upon them all. You see, Chen continued, pacing the chamber while the Council watched in horror as human warships surrounded the trapped Kraxin fleet. When you restrict a Deathworlder to safe trade routes, we don't just accept it. We learn why those routes are considered safe. When you limit us to primitive technology, we don't just comply. We perfect that technology, push it beyond what you thought possible. Security Director Malvex's mandibles clicked rapidly. The entertainment broadcasts, the historical lessons, were actual historical lessons. Chen nodded. We've been teaching our people the art of asymmetric warfare for thousands of years. Every restriction you placed on us became a challenge to overcome. Every limitation became an opportunity to innovate. A hologram showed human Marines boarding the Kraxan vessels. Their combat suits, far from primitive, moved with lethal grace in zero gravity. The supposedly fragile Deathworlders demonstrated exactly why evolution on a high-gravity Deathworld had made them natural space warriors. Ambassador Valera managed, her feathers cycling through distress patterns. Surely we can discuss this reasonably. The Council only wanted to protect us. Chen's laugh sent chills through the chamber. No, Administrator, you wanted to control us. The difference is crucial. She gestured, and the hologram showed more human ships emerging from hidden bases. We could have told you how foolish that was. Our history is full of examples of what happens when someone tries to protect humans by restricting them. Krixtal's transmission cut in again, but this time they could see him. The crystalline being was facing the human Marine whose armor bore the insignia of Eden 9 Defense Force. Please, the Kraxan Overseer begged. We thought you were primitive, helpless. That, the Marine replied calmly, was your first mistake. Your second was assuming our smiles meant submission. In the council chamber, Chen was still speaking. For 5 cycles, we've watched species like the Kraxan Corporation exploit those you deem inferior. We've documented every violation, every abuse of power, every instance of corruption that you've ignored in the name of galactic stability. The hologram shifted again, displaying evidence of Kraxan's crimes against other developing species. Evidence that the Council had conveniently overlooked, now documented with devastating thoroughness by seemingly primitive human sensors. Today isn't just about defending Eden 9, Chen announced. It's about showing the galaxy that being nice doesn't mean being weak, that compliance doesn't mean submission, and most importantly, she paused, looking directly at Valera. It's about teaching the Council that true protection comes from respect, not restriction. The human ships around the Kraxan fleet took up formation with military precision. Security Director Malvex's threat assessment systems finally understood what they'd been trying to tell them for 5 cycles. Humans hadn't been adapting to Council restrictions. They'd been using those restrictions as a smoke screen while they prepared for exactly this moment. Now then, Ambassador Chen's diplomatic smile returned, sharp as a blade. Shall we discuss new terms for humanity's participation in galactic affairs? I believe we have some suggestions about reforming the Council's approach to emerging species. The galaxy was about to learn an important lesson. Never mistake a Deathworlder's smile for weakness. Sometimes it's simply patience wearing a predator's mask. The Galactic Council chamber had never felt so silent. The floating platforms that usually hummed with diplomatic chatter hung motionless as Ambassador Chen activated a new holographic display. Security Director Malvex noticed that even the ambient atmosphere processors seemed to hold their breath. Let me show you what happens when you force Deathworlders to get creative, Chen said, her voice carrying an edge that made Valera's feathers flatten in instinctive fear. The hologram expanded, revealing a network of human installations throughout supposedly restricted space. Those toxic wastelands you so generously granted us. Chen gestured, and the dead zone colonies shimmed into focus. Perfect cover for quantum manufacturing facilities. Your sensors dismissed the energy signatures as natural radiation. We didn't correct that assumption. Valera's primary eyes widened as she finally understood. The mining operations were exactly what we claimed. At first, Chen's smile held no warmth now. But when you mine in gravity wells that would crush most species, you learn to develop interesting technologies. The hologram showed human miners working in conditions that should have been impossible, their primitive equipment revealing itself as anything but. Remember those safety protocols you insisted we follow? A new display showed the restricted trade routes. Thanks to them, we mapped every gravitational eddy, every spatial anomaly, every tactical advantage in the sectors you thought you were denying us. Your protective restrictions became our strategic playbook. Trade Minister Laxna's crystalline form vibrated with distress. But your ships, we monitored their capabilities. You monitored what we wanted you to see. Chen activated another display, showing human vessels transforming, outer hull layers peeling away to reveal technology that made several council members emit distress signals. Did you really think a species that survived on a death world would build ships without redundancies, without hidden capabilities? Security Director Malvex's mandibles clicked rapidly as his worst fears were confirmed. The entertainment broadcasts, the historical documentaries, were part of our training program. Chen nodded. We've been preparing our people for this moment since first contact. Every smile, every courteous acceptance of your restrictions, every seemingly primitive adaptation, it was all groundwork for today. The hologram shifted to show human space stations previously disguised as simple outposts. Their true forms emerged, massive research and development facilities, each specializing in different aspects of galactic technology. You gave us access to your scientific database as a gesture of goodwill, Chen continued. We didn't just study it. We improved it. Every species' technology has its strengths and weaknesses. We analyzed them all, found the synergies you missed, created hybridized systems that none of you thought possible. A new alert sounded through the chamber. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Human ships were emerging from hiding, not in aggressive formations, but in precise defensive positions around vulnerable developing worlds. We remember being vulnerable. Chen's voice softened slightly. We remember looking up at the stars and wondering if we were alone. That's why we couldn't stand by and watch species like the Kraxon Corporation prey on others while the Council looked away. The hologram displayed scenes from various worlds. Human ships providing protection to developing civilizations, advanced medical technology being shared with struggling colonies, new trade routes being established that bypass traditional power structures. Today isn't just about showing our strength, Chen declared. It's about reshaping how the galaxy treats emerging civilizations. No more protective restrictions. No more corporate exploitation disguised as assistance. No more dismissing species as primitive simply because they evolved on worlds you fear to tread. Valera's feathers shifted through patterns of shock, fear, and finally, understanding. You were never just complying with our restrictions. We were learning from them, Chen confirmed. Every limitation taught us a new way to innovate. Every dismissal of our capabilities gave us another opportunity to surpass expectations. And now, she gestured to the hologram showing human ships throughout the galaxy. Now we're going to help build something better. The chamber erupted in overlapping waves of communication as species frantically contacted their homeworlds. But Security Director Malvex noticed something telling. None of the human ships had powered up weapon systems. They were positioned defensively, not aggressively. You're not here to conquer, he realized aloud. Finally, Chen's smile returned, genuine this time. Someone understands. We're not here to rule the galaxy. We're here to change it. To ensure that the next species to look up at the stars finds mentors, not masters. The message was clear. Humanity had stopped playing nice, but they hadn't stopped being good. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between the two, whether it was ready or not. One standard year had passed since the day humanity revealed its true capabilities. The Galactic Council chamber had changed. Gone were the hierarchical tiers of floating platforms. Instead, representatives now met on a level field, their various environmental needs met by technology that bore distinct human influences. Administrator Valora, now simply Counselor Valora, found herself studying Ambassador Chen during the first session of the reformed Galactic Assembly. The human smile hadn't changed, but everyone now understood what it meant. Not submission, but patience, not weakness, but carefully measured strength. The integration of former Kraxan worlds into the protected development zone has been completed, Chen reported. The holographic display showed planets where once exploited species were now flourishing under their own governance, with human ships maintaining a watchful presence against any would-be exploiters. And the Technology Sharing Initiative? Security Director Malvex inquired. He had kept his position, largely because he'd been the only one to sense the truth about humanity's potential. Proceeding as planned. Chen gestured, expanding the display to show various worlds where human engineers worked alongside other species. We're teaching them how to adapt technology to their specific needs, not forcing them to adapt to the technology. The chamber's attention turned to a massive structure taking shape in neutral space, the Galactic Development Center, humanity's answer to the previous system of restricted trade and controlled technological access. Who would have thought, Zixtal bubbled from his observation pod, that the species we tried to restrict would end up teaching us about true innovation? The xenobiologist had spent the past year studying how humans had modified seemingly primitive technology into sophisticated systems that worked in harmony with natural laws rather than trying to overcome them. Perhaps that was our greatest mistake, Valera admitted, her feathers shifting in patterns of reflection. We saw their adaptability as a sign of submission rather than what it truly was, an expression of their greatest strength. The hologram shifted to show the former restricted zones, now transformed into thriving trade hubs where species of all technological levels could interact and learn from each other. Human ships still patrolled these regions, but their presence was protective rather than restrictive. The latest surveys from the developing worlds are particularly interesting, Chen noted, bringing up new data. When given the freedom to advance at their own pace, with protection rather than restriction, species show a 300% increase in sustainable technological development. Former Trade Minister Laxna, now serving as an advisor on ethical commerce, chimed in. The human approach to technological adaptation has revolutionized our understanding of development. Their insistence on working with natural limitations rather than trying to overcome them. Because limitations breed creativity, Chen finished. Something we learned long ago on Earth. When you can't overpower an obstacle, you learn to work with it, around it, through it. That's why your restrictions never had the effect you intended. The chamber grew quiet as a new alert appeared. Another species had achieved first contact capability. In the past, this would have triggered an immediate response from the Council, complete with restrictions and regulations. Now the procedure was different. First Contact Team Alpha is standing by, Chen reported. As usual, we'll make initial contact alongside representatives from other formerly restricted species. They tend to respond better to those who understand their position. Valera watched as the human-led contact team prepared for their mission. Their ships, no longer hiding their true capabilities, still maintained that distinctive human approach, technology that worked with natural forces rather than against them, strength masked by simplicity, power tempered by purpose. A year ago, she mused aloud, I would have said it was impossible for a Deathworld species to become a guiding force in galactic politics. I would have said their aggression, their survival instincts, would make them conquerors. That's because you never understood what makes humans truly dangerous. Malvex clicked softly. It's not our strength or our technology. He gestured to his newly installed human cybernetic enhancements, a choice many council members had made over the past year. It's our ability to remember being weak, to understand vulnerability, and to choose protection over power. Ambassador Chen's smile took on a gentler quality. We stopped playing nice, she agreed, but we never stopped being kind. That's the real lesson here. Strength without compassion is just another form of weakness. The Chamber's attention turned to the first contact mission launching toward the newly discovered civilization. The human ships, their advanced technology now clearly visible, moved in formation with vessels from a dozen other species. Each had once been dismissed as primitive. Each had been restricted and controlled, and each had now found their own path forward under humanity's new approach to galactic development. Still, Valera's feathers rippled with amusement. I do wish you had told us sooner about your true capabilities. It would have saved quite a bit of bureaucratic paperwork. Chen's laugh echoed through the chamber. But then you wouldn't have learned the most important lesson of all. Never underestimate a smiling Deathworlder. We might be the most dangerous when we're being nice. As the assembly turned to discuss new initiatives for galactic cooperation, the message was clear. The galaxy had changed, not through force or conquest, but through the patient, persistent, and ultimately unstoppable power of a species that had learned to turn restrictions into opportunities, limitations into strengths, and protection into progress. The day the Deathworlders stopped playing nice had become the day the galaxy started getting better.